Hey, Will. It's been a little while since we talked. As I was saying offline, I have plenty of excuses not to get this podcast up and running, but I am doing my best for whoever's actually listening to that. And along with,
We're off to
along,
another stunning start,
I
Francis.
do
For
my
my
best.
mom out there. Hey, Mom. Thanks for the download.
Yes.
Oh, my
More
God.
download.
Come on. You got to sell, man. You got to
So,
sell. The best
and
comic podcast about editorial material on the internet.
awesome. I don't know if anybody's actually listening to this show. I see, numbers, but then I get
You
people
haven't
like,
listened to any of these podcasts, though? That's what I want to know. There's only like 24 hours in a day.
yes, there is, and you can't take so much. But also, we have a special guest star, Stephanie Phillips. Hello, thank you for blowing up your morning and coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Another rousing introduction. Thanks for wasting your time on this call this morning, Stephanie. My God, what is happening? I actually like the reality of this podcast. We're not pretending.
No, and I will try, because I know you guys have more important things to do today.
Strike three.
I'm trying to get you out as soon as possible.
Turn it off. It's fine. Turn it off.
Hey, I'm sticking with my theme and my attitude right now.
That's true. You're like the Eeyore of editorial comic book podcasts.
So. Thank you for coming on, Will.
Thanks for noticing, everybody.
Hi, Stephanie.
I can right, exactly. I can be Winnie the Pooh then. That's great. I love Winnie the Pooh.
Wow.
Yeah, I just I've been told throughout life to stop being an Eeyore at times.
Why does Winnie the Pooh wear a shirt and no pants? That was always was the question. Maybe we can get to the bottom of that before the end of the. A lot of cartoon characters do that. Actually, Donald Duck does that too. Sorry, Stephanie, you came on to talk about serious matters like your career in comics and how you walked away from a lucrative career in academia.
I'm more interested in how a bear would wear pants, actually.
Right. We'll get to the bottom of that sooner than later.
Yeah, I never asked that question. I have to, when I was working in animation, never asked. There's probably I'll have to look it up. There's probably a term for that, for having, characters who are semi-clothed. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's relatability. There's probably something in the animation industry for animators about, he's this kind of character, because it's all about the silhouette. Will has mentioned throughout the years that he's unfortunately had to talk to me about managing talent. And when I was trying to think of how to, do a podcast that's, interesting and different, we've never really talked about building a career. Really, I don't think I have. I've done a lot of interviews about how somebody's career moved forward and what they did, the steps to become an editor. But for talent and management and trying to bring it back to what an editor does, make or break a career in a way, because an editor is the person who hires, I was like, let's dive into this. What I've noticed in comics is that there's an evolution of editors become not only your boss, they start out as your boss, they start out as somebody's critiquing, but eventually a mentor, possibly a friend, or a good source of income of constantly, I want a go-to person for both. The writer becomes a go-to person, and then the editor becomes a go-to person for the writer to maybe keep you employed. So what the beginning of it, Will, maybe you can take this give a general feel of where you are as a talent manager, is basically, because the overall idea of this show is to discuss how you manage your career and get to a point where you can quit your day job, and then let's go from there. But you've broken a couple people into the industry throughout the years. The first thing somebody should do right to stay in the industry. And maybe, Stephanie, what did you do right to keep the ball rolling once you got your foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, I want to know how Will manages my talent. That's really
more like manages your personality.
Wow.
No, I mean, it's different for me now because, when I was at Vertigo and I didn't really think of myself as the boss, because, I was still working on creator-owned books, even though, that was a loosely used term, because it was a shared ownership and all the rest. So it wasn't as pure as like an Image or even a Distillery necessarily, but I learned over the years for sure, and since I left there, that I think that the talent saw me much more, as like sort of like a boss or someone that could fire them or that kind of stuff. Like I had a lot more stroke than I necessarily wielded or used. Like I mean, I can count on one hand like the people I've fired probably in my whole career. I definitely got that sense over the years. So there was more of a path then to sort of bringing somebody in, putting them on something maybe smaller or company owned, and then moving them, letting them try to do their own thing, and then trying to figure out like what the next thing was. I mean, I was constantly kind of doing that, because I think the mistake a lot of people make is that they, and Stephanie, I think, is really good about not doing this, but a lot of people don't do this, is like, you don't start looking for your next job like on the 5th issue of a 5-issue miniseries, right? Like, I mean, you start looking for the next job like before you've even started the 5-issue miniseries, probably. But I think a lot of people would do that. Like, it was just kind of go from one to the next to the next, and then I don't think most editors thought the way I did. I mean, I think the Vertigo editors did more than, but I don't think your typical DCU or Marvel editor really thought that way. It was kind of like they were just trying to get the stuff in, get it out. If they could put you on something else, they would, but they weren't spending a lot of time thinking about your career, what was next for you. But like, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out for all the people, because I felt like even in any job, it takes so long to train people and get them up to speed and all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was like, if I'm giving you one of my very limited slots, like, I'm not just doing it for like a one night stand, right? I mean, I feel like it's like this long-term relationship, hopefully. And it doesn't even need to be with me. It didn't have to be with me. Like, I would take guys down to the DCU and walk them around and introduce them to everybody, just to be like, we need to keep this person in house, so because Vertigo for a long time served as that kind of, I wouldn't say it was like the minor leagues, but it should have been more of like a breeding ground for people to go on to stuff. But a lot of times they just didn't. I don't know. The DCU guys were very short-sighted about that. I mean, Jason Aaron being like the perfect example of like a guy I hand walked around to every editor, including DiDio in the DCU, introduced him, said you should be working with this guy, whatever. Like, not one person called him or reached out to him. And then Axel signed him to an exclusive at Marvel, and like that was the end of that, and it took him 20 years to get back to DC. Yeah, now it's a little different just because I'm kind of like the last person hired often. There's still people that, once you get a relationship with somebody, you want to cultivate it and keep it going. And, if they're happy with it too, I mean, it requires a lot of back and forth, but I think it's more the outlook of like, are we partners in this? Are we colleagues in this? Am I here to support what you're trying to do? Or am I just hiring you to fill a slot?
Stephanie, seeing that you had to worry about your next job, how did you sort of expand from the first day, your first gig going? Did you work on establishing a relationship with the editor beyond just, making deadlines? Or how did you approach, getting your career up and running when it comes to the networking and, learning the business once that you're in it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like kind of like Will was saying, the relationship that you have with somebody that you hope it's going to be a long-term thing, whether they're at Marvel and then move somewhere and you kind of go with them. I've definitely had that kind of thing happen. I mean, in the same way, there are people that I might be friends with personally, but working together, it's not the greatest fit for me and how I work. So it's also knowing that about myself, because to me, an editor is a partner. That's something that I really, really value in the projects that I do, because I'm super vocal. So when I work on a project, I want somebody I can call up and say, like, here's what I was thinking, and just be able to have a sounding board. And usually through that conversation, I work out whatever issue I'm having or kind of figure out what I'm writing that way. And that's like my starting point. So there are some editors that just aren't super into that process. Like, I think they want to be more of like a project manager and move things along, which is their style. So when I find somebody that I really mesh with in that way, and it's like, oh, our partnership is really good for me, it's really good for the book, when that all clicks, then I want to keep that moving. So it is like a relationship. You're like trying to figure out, I don't want to go on 50 first dates. I want like to know, Will and I have been through this before. If I'm stuck on something, we've been through the process of like what I feel like or how it feels for me to be stuck. And I think, we've learned how to work on those things together. I have newer relationships right now with editors at Marvel, and I've also learned to just be very upfront about, this is the way I work, this is what happens when I get stuck, this is how I feel about it. And I don't want to see them so much as like, oh no, I can't tell them I'm stuck on something because they're my boss and they'll never hire me again. And it's like, that's a very wrong mentality. It's bad for creatives, it's bad for the book. I want somebody I can sincerely call up, email, whatever it is, and say, I'm stuck on this. I would really like your help. And here's what I'm thinking. Like, work on a solution with me. And that's also how I can see if an editor is a really good fit for me. It's like, oh, the person that then calls me up and we have a conversation and everything feels really good. Like, that's what I want to keep.
And when we're talking about managing your career here, was that something in your head of like, this is what I got to do to keep this going? Or was this something sort of just organic that just happened?
I don't think I ever thought like, I have to keep this going. There has not yet, I'm going to find some wood to knock on, but there has not yet been a point at which I have not had people asking me for more work. So even when it was very early on, and once I got my first book published, I had met some people at Aftershock, Mike Martz, who brought me in over there, I think is responsible for a lot of this. Him kind of opening that one door, and meeting some of the Aftershock team. And again, Mike's at Mad Cave now, and I've talked to Mike about things at Mad Cave, which is great. I have a good relationship with him, and that's something that, even though we're not actively working together, I love that we formed a good relationship. I did 3 or 4 books with Mike. So I'm in very early on in my career, like that was my editor, and just kind of built that relationship while working together, and also learned what an editorial relationship could be from that early process. Because the first book I did not have an editor on it. It was very DIY. I did not know about that. I just like hired an artist to draw a few pages. It got accepted at a very small independent publisher, and they published it. They paid the page rate for the artist, so they took off the financial burden. That's what I wanted. I've made $0 off of that book ever to this day. Like, I've maybe sold a copy at a convention one time or something, but which is fine, because what that did was it showed the next company, I can finish a book, I can put out a book, and also they could read my writing. So that helped Aftershock, the Aftershock team, say like, oh, this is actually a potential up and coming writer that we can have a conversation with. So every new thing you do is opening a door somewhere. It's kind of just like, where is that door, and talking to those people, and kind of making the best of the situation. So like, if I'm given that opportunity to write another book now at Aftershock, I'm going to do the best possible thing I can do. And usually, like, Aftershock's not really around anymore, but at the time it would be like, as I was working on one book, before that book was over, I'd have them say, what's the next thing you're going to do with us? And because that relationship is so good for everyone, and we wanted to keep it going.
Is that
how conscious of that were you? Were you just sort of fortunate that they were asking you to do more, or were you saying to yourself, did you have a plan to be like, oh, I need to keep this going, or I need to start getting introductions to other people, or as you say, like, people have just sort of gravitated to you since you kind of broke in?
It's probably a mix. I don't know that any of it is just completely accidental, but some of it is like just showing up, and like, the person that brought in Grimm to Boom Studios, I met at a New York Comic Con party in a line for the bar. Like that's, and it's not like I didn't know who they were. So I'd never met them before. I wasn't like, hey, I've got a book for you. It was just a conversation because we were stuck in a long line and this is the person I'm going to talk to. I think just formed an organic relationship. Like that was, I don't know that this is an editor, so I'm not tapping them on the shoulder to like fake a conversation and hope it goes somewhere. I had never seen them before in my life, and it was by chance.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of that, like just being me and who I am. Like I mean, part of the reason I got my first work at DC Comics was because somebody happened to read something that I was writing a lot about martial arts because I did Muay Thai for a long time, and somebody happened to see an article I wrote about martial arts studies, and they were like, oh, well, we might have this opportunity for, it was an 8-page Wildcat story, but Wildcat was a boxer, and they wanted to bring in a different perspective on the connection between martial arts and this character. And they were like, well, it's a brand new writer, but also somebody that has this lived experience that they might be able to bring to this character in a different way. And so I straight up know I got a shot writing a Wildcat story at DC because of who I am, like just by the very nature that I did martial arts, which is a weird thing. Like I don't know, tell people like, I guess go do martial arts, and maybe you'll get a comic book job at DC.
Well, it's more like I think Ray Bradbury said it. It's like every time you write something, you start a conversation, basically. And what was this article that you wrote? Was it just something you put like on a blog or Substack or something, or that
no,
they found?
I did a lot of academic research on women's bodies and martial arts studies. I would go to, there are some martial arts conferences, there are feminism conferences that I like, rhetoric and feminism conferences I would go to. And so I think posting pieces of the research projects I did, like I did a pretty massive study where I actually interviewed lots of women martial artists, and I was publishing some of my findings, and it has, like that alone, not only did it get found by comic book people, but to this day I still get messages about it from other people who are doing that research and want to interview me specifically about that research, which I'm not a good interview about that. That was so long ago, and I don't do academic research anymore, so my brain would be like mushy in that area. But I mean, it's clear that people are still finding that or still interested in something that I did that's very weird. But all I'm doing is being myself, and people find parts of that interesting or find ways that who I am translates to some of the characters I get to write.
Yeah, because that is something, I guess, when you're starting out or even moving, that everybody's got a unique point of view. You know, I'm the son of a funeral director. You know, I have 3 generations of funeral directing behind me.
Talk about burying the lead, Francis. What are we talking about?
Yeah,
but I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know why is this not a podcast about funeral directing?
I can do that. I'm a little rusty. My sister's the one who took business over, but everybody, if you think about it, there's something in your life prior to like becoming a writer or something as you are a writer. There's other things going on. There's family history that you might be involved in that makes your point of view is so unique. So I guess, if we're talking about what's in your quiver as a writer and as a talent, what do you bring to it? Jason Aaron had this history of a friend who served in Vietnam, right? And also
his cousin was the guy in Full Metal Jacket, like the Matthew Modine character, the Joker character was like his cousin, like actual, and he had spent a lot of time following up on that and like going to Vietnam reunions with that same unit and everything. And so he was very like steeped in the whole world of that. So yeah, that was the thing to me that like when he sent this stuff in originally, like otherwise, it was literally like a cold email. So, but I was like, well, that's pretty interesting. I love that movie. That was the thing, that struck me as like, worth at least responding to him, out of the 1,000 cold calls I took in all those years,
But it's that, write what you know, but not really write what you know. It's just maybe make sure people know about something about you, and an editor can lack onto that.
Yeah, I've always said in like I had that like 1-page pitch document that I used to give to people, that was sort of broke down. But and it was just like the log line, like the plot, like a paragraph on kind of who the target audience was or why this is different than the 10 other angels versus devils pitches I'd read that day, And then, but then I also was like, make sure there's like a bio thing in there, like something. Yeah. And it's not just like, oh, he lives in Brooklyn with his cat. Like, I mean, something about yourself that sort of.
I guess it's not always just professionalism. It's in being professional and just sort of constantly having your elevator pitch ready. It's about just, if you're going to a convention, just being who you are and engaging with anybody. Don't be so, just let people know who you are. Do you feel that have you taken that approach, I guess? I mean, standing in line, just starting a conversation with somebody. I might not do that, but
no, I'm not. I definitely don't think I was the one who started that. I'm not a just randomly start a conversation. I would stand there silently for hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. That makes me feel better because I probably would too.
No, but also, I mean, it's just like, it's hard to tell somebody how to have social interactions. I don't entirely know how to do that. It's kind of like either you know how to have a conversation with somebody or you don't at some point. Like there's just sometimes I see people at conventions who are just, it is clear all they are doing is trying to work in that they have a pitch and want a job. And I don't think anybody really likes that. Like, if you're just hanging out and you're an editor and it's like, oh, I'm now in the bar and I get a chance to like unwind and have a drink. The last thing you want is somebody that clearly wants something from you. Like that's just a weird, uncomfortable position to be in. And yeah. I mean, maybe it's also the fact that I've never needed anything from somebody. Like, I mean, there are jobs I've clearly wanted or been excited for, but early on, I was a professor. I had a full professor's salary, health benefits. I was excited to write a comic that I didn't know would ever turn into a career. If I was at a convention, it was just cool. I was not looking for something from somebody, and I think that benefited me a lot. And I'm seeing that happen now as I'm doing more and more, primarily television. In some ways, I actually didn't want to do television. I really didn't want this. I was like, my attorney and my agent often get a little like, why are you saying no to this? And I'm like, because I don't want to do it. I'm not a television writer. This is not interesting to me. Or adapting. I have a project in the work that is an adaptation of something I wrote. I co-wrote the pilot with somebody else, and then there's more on the table. Like, do you want to write more? And I mean, God, my agent must hate me because I don't. I'm like, no, I wrote the book already. I don't need to write it a second time. But the TV stuff just keeps coming in that way as well. I don't need it. I'm not looking for it. I'm not out there in somebody's face as a car salesman for something. It has all been incredibly organic, and I feel very fortunate for those positions. But I think there's something to be said for, I mean, we've been talking about it kind of like a relationship. Like the more desperate somebody is like icky, like when somebody's super clingy and clearly desperate and following you around, and like it becomes a little stalkery, and like it's an uncomfortable feeling. So
and I would say too, I mean, even just from a mindset standpoint, which I find to be like important always in every interaction, it's just sort of like your mindset about things and I'm not always great at obviously adjusting my mindset to certain things, but I'm always pushing people even to this day. I mean, I was even talking to some fairly well established people recently about something, and it's like, you kind of have to have this attitude of like, they need me more than I need them. Like that's a very attractive attitude, as much as that sounds kind of like it wouldn't be, or it's obnoxious or something, but it's just that idea. And I think that could help people, particularly people who would consider themselves introverts or not so great at the schmoozing shit or whatever. But there is like a much more value to me in the person that feels, even if it's phony confidence or whatever, but it's kind of like, look, I'm the creator, I'm the writer, like I'm the one with the ideas, like you need to sort of be in business with me, and I think that's the thing, because I mean, like that desperation is like probably the like least attractive of all the human qualities. I mean, I've told these stories before, but it's like, Yeah, I've had people follow me to the bathroom to pitch me shit.
Oh, geez.
Pitch me shit at the bar. Oh, can I buy you a drink? And you're talking and you think it's like, oh, this, there's a new person I'm meeting. This is cool. Because I'm always out to meet people and I'm much more outgoing than most in the industry. But, and then suddenly it's like, oh, I have this idea. And you're like, oh, all right, this is what we're doing here, I mean, and I don't know. I always I used to take a lot of shit at Vertigo because I wouldn't come back from shows to like San Diego with like a hit list of, oh, I talked to this person and they're going to do this. And I talked to that person, and they're going to do that. But I would be like, Karen would bust my chops about like, how come this receipt is 4:30 in the morning that you signed out? And I was like, well, because I just spent 7 hours like developing like rapport with like all these people, and it's like, and getting them to feel comfortable enough to share their ideas with me, as like the first reader of stuff. Because it is a very intimate relationship, like it's still, I don't care who you are. Scott Snyder sends me a pitch, or not a pitch, a script. I'm still getting a call, like, or a text or something. Like, did you get it? Did you read it? Did you like it? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that ever goes away for really anybody. Like the feeling of like they want response, they want feedback, they want you to like it, they want it to be good. I need all those things.
In one way, you shouldn't always be closing in a way, because my experience, in pitching was, I even said it to my agent, I feel very, very awkward at hitting this person up for a job. And he's like, but my agent, she said, that's why you're going to that meeting. So, I mean, there are times when you have you're setting up meetings for drinks or whatever to, pitch and develop and ask for a job. But there's other times where you just have to, develop the relationships. I mean, we're talking, first started relationship is just have a conversation with somebody, talk about something else. As we were talking about with the fighting or the funeral directing, is let them know something about you, I guess, instead of always be talking about setting up a project or what's your new pitch or whatever. There are times when you have to be selling, right, Stephanie? Or
Sure. I mean, when that's the intent of what's happening here, when you have a scheduled meeting that it's like, all right, this meeting is specifically to be pitching something, my agent sets those up for me too. And it's like, all right, we're going to sit down with Netflix. And I know what that is. I mean, and that's multiple things, right? Like Netflix might not take something right then, but sitting in the room with the people of Netflix and again, just having a conversation so that we all know each other. Maybe it doesn't develop into something that day, but I think sometimes people are thinking really myopically in terms of like nothing happened today. So now like, oh, damn it, like that's blown. And it's like, no, something might happen. Like, and again, it might not even be there. What if one of those Netflix executives and I had great rapport and they go work for Paramount and they remember me and they're reading my work and now something develops here. It's like, you never know. And a lot of those relationships are just very genuine. Like, this is somebody I would say with Will, it's just very genuine that we are two people that ended up working together. And I have built a relationship with Will that is different from other editors I've worked with. And I will continue to work with Will because we clicked in that way. And it's something that I think newer writers might be scared to really say, like, to put your trust in the editor, like, oh, they are the first reader, because again, that's vulnerable and that's scary, but you have to have that trust with the editor. And I don't know, I think that's something that once you have, it's like, I don't want to lose it. Yeah. Like anything that's not at Marvel, Will is editing. Like that's just how I am now. And I get a little picky and choosy about that, but
yeah, I mean, thankfully comics, I mean, the nice thing about comics is that still is a little easier to pull that off. Like you said, like the movie TV stuff is slightly more formalized in terms of, like, you set up a meeting, you have a call. It's maybe harder to connect with those people outside of it. But yeah, I mean, I think you said at the beginning, Stephanie, it's like just sort of showing up. Like there is value to just kind of showing up, whether that's at a show or that's at a thing. But yeah, because I mean, I've said this before too, but it's like the elevator pitch isn't the pitch to sell your project. It's the pitch to sell the meeting about your project. Like that's what you're trying to sell. It's not like no one ever listened to a 30-second pitch and was like, oh my God, I have to have that. But it's like, okay, that sounds really cool. Let's set up a call or let's go have coffee or whatever it is kind of thing. And thankfully comics is still pretty low hanging fruit in terms of being able to interact with the actual people that make the decisions, as opposed to in Hollywood where it's much more tiered and there's so many more layers to it.
Definitely. And I mean, something you said to Francis about just the confidence of being able to do that. I get a lot of questions about like, oh, at what point, like, do you still have imposter syndrome? And I'll just be honest, I've never had imposter syndrome. That doesn't mean that I'm not filled with self-doubt or wanting to make something better constantly. I mean, Will can tell you that I'm never satisfied. Like, I'm always angry that something isn't as good as it can be. But I also know that I went to school for 9 years to get a master's and a PhD in writing, that at its very core, that should be like, I'm a good writer. I did all the things that were really difficult to do in order to get the paper on my wall that says I can at least write a sentence. I worked incredibly hard in independent comics, making sure I was doing the best I could be. I took on a separate job to pay for art pages that I could pitch to places because I wasn't going to not pay an artist. Like, I know all these things that I did. And so, I mean, some of it looks like luck, but at its core, we're also saying like, before I ever touched a character at DC, I had been writing for years, whether it was the academic publications I did, I worked as an editor on textbooks. The amount of writing that I have done and things that I gave up or took on extra work for to get to this position, to be able to say no to a job or to be able to continuously get offered work. It's like, that didn't just happen. That was built piece by piece. Was built, and I think it has granted me kind of the confidence to not have to walk in a room and wonder like, where is the job coming from?
Because of the degrees you have, there's a discipline that you had to have to get through them, obviously, definitely. And one thing I've noticed with my struggles with writing is and looking back, it was when you're writing, if we're talking about, if you're as a writer building a career and managing your career, you can never forget about the writing, putting pieces out, doing stuff, because it puts you in a frame of mind. So getting your ass in front of the keyboard is, something you just do, almost muscle memory, but you just have to constantly be writing, putting stuff out there. That's how I feel. That's how I looked at it. If, I wrote for a while and pitched like crazy and set up stuff, but it was because every day that's what I was doing, and the moment you stop doing that, you're not making conversations, you're not as a writer. So if you want to keep your career going, that's the one thing you have to do, because you can talk about writers and, oh, that writer sucks, but that writer finished that project. That writer put something together and started a conversation and is moving. That's what you need to do. I mean, did that ever occur? Did you just do that naturally, or was that something that you have to remind yourself on every so often, Stephanie, regarding, maintaining your career and keeping it moving forward, especially if you're saying no to jobs at times too?
Yeah. You mean like taking my foot off the gas pedal?
Well, when you say no, that was one thing I was going to ask, because I remember talking to Denny O'Neil, and he said he had a trouble saying no to jobs in comics, and he's editing, he's, a group editor, but he's still writing, because he always felt, and I got this from, other freelancers from back in the day, that by saying no, they were worried it sends the wrong message. My take is that it's not necessarily you have to say no, because you're saying, I don't want to rewrite my book. If Hollywood comes a calling and, they're definitely giving you more money than comics. I hope they still are giving you more money than comics nowadays. But it's just that I might have lost the thread on this one a bit, but maybe it's not, you can say no because you're always writing. Maybe that's the way to protect yourself from my conversations with Denny O'Neil, who felt that he could never say no to a job because people might, he's too busy to work, too busy to go back, so I'll never ask him again, or something. Like, I think there just seemed to be this thing about the way he explained it. And it was a long time ago when I had that conversation. But now it seems like, for me, it's like, you just need to be writing to move your career forward. That's one thing you have to do to take agency in your career, is to be writing. and then you get the chance to pick and choose.
Yeah, I mean, but also I think knowing when to say no. I think the impulse to just take a job because it's a job, it's absolutely there, because it's scary to say no and not know if you're going to get offered something else. For sure, I understand that. But if you were offered something where you were not going to do a good job on it for whatever reason, whether it is a busy schedule, or I'll be honest, there are characters I'm not a fit for, and I've said no to those characters because it is not the right fit for me. And if I take that character and I do a bad job with it, that's also going to be like like, why would you want to do that to yourself? Like, your name is on.
It's almost worse than just saying no to it, you know?
Yeah. Like, I'm very conscientious of the fact that my name is on this book. So I am progressively getting more and more selective about what my name is put on. And if I am thinking about something, like, I'll usually take a little bit if I'm unsure, like, oh, I don't know about this, take a little bit and be like, I didn't think about, I didn't come up with the like winning idea. It's not clicking for me. You know, I might go read some more of that character or something. And it's like, that's not like meshing with me and what I want to do right now. And I'll be very honest about that. You know, I've turned down a few things for that reason, and that's important to me.
I mean, you have to learn to do that. I mean, I understand where Denny's coming from, particularly in the era he was working, because the companies, as much as people complain about the companies now, the companies were much less talent friendly then, right? You know, I mean, if Julie Schwartz didn't like you, it was like, fuck you, you're out, you're done. Like, you can just stick a fork in it, you know? And then he might call the guys down at Marvel and say, don't hire him either. You know what I mean? So like, I understand where he was coming from in that respect, because they were much more considered. There wasn't any creator owned really. I mean, it was just sort of, they didn't have a lot of options. Like, you either worked for Marvel or DC, or you were, you know, Charlton or whatever it was. But so I understand where he was coming from, but yeah, I mean, I think it's like even coming back to like the management aspect. It's like, for me, sometimes when I see people making these decisions about what jobs they're taking, like, I'm always like, what's the return on investment? Like, what's the return for you taking that third Marvel book that maybe Marvel doesn't even care that much about, or it's just to fill a slot, or it's just to keep, you know, the copyright active? I mean, you know, you know what I'm saying? It's like just to fill shelf space, you know, versus, could that time be better spent developing something else, you know, like in those hours in the day? Could you, and that's I mean, I know that's a scary proposition, because you're often very tempted just to take the money that's on the barrelhead versus like the longer term stuff. But you know, that's to me the kind of things that, like, where I'm managing people more directly with, those are the kind of conversations. It's just like, is that worth it to take that fourth book when, you know, I mean, even there's only 4 weeks in a month necessarily. So it's like, is it really going to devote, you know, do you want to give up all your weekends on top of the 4 other weeks you're giving up to do that fifth book? Or is that time better spent developing the thing? Because to me, it's like, you know, like, I want this, like, Stephanie she focuses, she's shown in a lot of her TikToks, if you watch her TikToks, you know, like her shelf at home with all of her own books on it, you know, which I think is very good for current writers and for her mentally, because it's sort of like you're putting these, you can literally see the bricks that you're putting up to build this thing. But I think to me, that's like the end goal. Like, I'm always so disappointed by these people that they come in and they do a project, and then they go to Marvel and they do some stuff, and then they just keep doing that stuff, you know, or they move to DC and they're another big group guy and they're just stuck there. And it's like, you know, I mean, sure, if you luck out and you happen to write Marvels, or you happen to write, you know, Kingdom Come or Watchmen or something, and that stays on the shelf forever. But the stuff that's going to stick around is the stuff that the creator owns stuff, you know, or that's the stuff you want to stick around, right? Because you're getting a much better return on that, even from like
that's where I make money.
A royalty structure. Yeah. I mean, you've told me that it's like you make way more money on the stuff that you've done at, say, Boom, even though maybe like the page rates aren't what they are at Marvel or DC, whatever it is, kind of thing. Because it's like, but that's like I've always argued with people, it's like, you want that section on the bookshelf that's just yours and that's there, because you're not going to, you have a very small window in which you're, you know, hot, desirable, popular, whatever, you know, that they're calling you. Eventually they're going to stop calling, you know, because the editors you've worked with have aged out or quit or moved on or retired or whatever. So it's like, you have to make K while the sun shines. So it's like, but in that respect, it's like I'm just yeah. There are people who I look at career wise, and I'm just like, why are you doing 5 work for hire gigs 20 years into your career when you should be doing 2 work for hire gigs and 3 creator owned gigs, so that those things are going to be around, and you own them and you can sell them and you can resell them, and someday you'll get them back and you can repackage them and take them to somebody else. I don't know. I can't explain that. I wish I could.
Like, I'll be honest, when I was like, oh yes, I want to be a comic book writer, there was no piece of my brain that went, I can't wait to write my own creator-owned books at Boom. Like, and that's not obviously grim. It's like my comic book baby. Like, I'm not dissing my own work here, but that's not where your brain goes. Your brain goes, I want to write Batman. I want to write Daredevil. I want to write Superman. Like, those are the things that I think attract people. And that's also why you have things, people willing to give up so much, and that kind of like desperate feel, like I would do anything to work on this property that means so much to me. And I think that's how we get into those where like the kind of business and personal sides start to overlap, and people forget about the business side because the personal starts to like overshadow it. You have this feeling of nostalgia of like, oh yeah, of course I will write this character that I love so much for half my page rate and this crazy schedule that I can't maintain, but I'll give up other things to make this work because it's that character that, I get it. Like, I came in the same way. Like, this is what that's what I wanted to do. And so I maintain, I think, and I hope, a healthy balance between the two things. I really value my own creator-owned work. It is financially and in the long term the most viable thing for me to be doing, because I have an incredible agent who has done a great job of selling those things. So what I'm getting from those has really made a foundation for me so that I can say yes and no to the projects I want at Marvel DC. And that is it is a very fortunate, really wonderful position that my own creator-owned work has put me in. And then that means the work I'm doing at Marvel, I feel like, is my best work. Like, I mean, not over my creator-owned, but I mean, I'm able to take on a project that I feel like I can give you my best work, because I'm not desperate. I'm not taking every little thing. I'm waiting for the book that I know I will excel at and the character that I have something to say with. If I don't have anything to say with the character, that's a bad mix. And that's taking work just for the money. And again, I know so many people that are probably in that position that need that income. So it's a really difficult thing to sit here and be like, no, that's the place we all need to get to, or we should be getting to. I've been really fortunate that some of the stuff I've written has allowed me to get to that.
Yeah. Do you feel?
But I mean, it's tricky though, because like these companies know that, right? I mean, don't think for a second they don't know that. So I think that's a trap a lot of people fall into. They know that you're willing to take a pay cut or not value yourself as highly as you should be valued, because they are selling you on this, childhood dream, or, your nostalgia shit or whatever it is. That's completely built into the business model. And anyone who thinks it isn't is full of shit and doesn't know what they're talking about. I mean, I used to work with guys at DC that worked there for 20 years, like in the mailroom for peanuts, never got raises, never got anything. But because we used to get like a huge stack of comics every week, they would literally have conversations with you about, well, if I was in the real world, I would be spending all my money on these comics. So because I get thousands of dollars a year per, for free comics, it's basically like I'm not making $27,000 a year, but I'm really making $34,000 a year. And I would be like, oh, you poor bastards. Like, the second you start arguing for the company store when you're the miner living in like the, Ramble shack, like they got you, like they just got you.